I'm just going to start off by saying hi, everyone. If you are tuning in, the reason for today's episode is because of the one that we missed. So we are just basically we had some technical difficulties on Monday when we were supposed to be doing Catherine Dubois' episode, and it did happen, but it just didn't happen to stream, which is kind of the important part, if not the whole thing. So I am really excited because I did remember to at least record um, the interview. Sorry. One second. So we only missed about the first 10 minutes of it, which, as you guys know, if you've seen the show before, the first 10 minutes is like mostly me talking anyway. That being said, I guess we should get started. And also, stay tuned next week because we're going to be interviewing Displaced Comedians Administrator Nico Ulof. And I really shouldn't have started this till I was like really ready to go with all of my documents. But, oh, here we go. Yeah, you guys know about, like, if you want to watch previous episodes, you can go to our YouTube channel, Facebook page, or Twitch. They hold on to them only for like 2 weeks there, though, so keep that in mind. And, of course, you can watch live at district-comedy.live. But today, or Monday, rather, we had Cinetic Theater's company director, Katherine Dubois, a DC native. Katherine first started directing and producing as a teenager with Wildwood Summer Theater, where she coached, produced, and directed for 6 seasons. Katherine earned her degree in drama via Ithaca College, the Eugene O'Neill National Theater Institute, and the St. Petersburg Imperial Academy of the Arts. As a physical theater artist, Katherine has focused on the techniques of Drosnin, Grotowski, Meyerhold, Jazzo, and has trained and performed with Cinetic for over 10 years. An award-winning filmmaker, Katherine has exclusively focused on women as the project of her film work. As part of her series of quiet dramas, she wrote, produced, and starred in The Challenge Coin, Back Home, and Awake. Her most recent work, Space to Explore, profiles aerospace engineer Natalie Panek and her goal to be the first astronaut on Mars. She is Cinetic Theater's company director, as I mentioned earlier, and a company member of over 10 years. She's performed in several shows, most recently The Tempest, and has directed Cinetic's recent virtual show Joy, featuring actress Maria Simpkins. And Katherine is also known for online hosting, co-hosting rather, over 40 trailer reaction videos on the popular Real Rejects YouTube channel, and they were very funny, so I highly recommend you go watch them. And then, of course, the reason we're all here, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, of course, but also go donate to Cinetic Theater. When I switch screens, we're going to see the website where you can donate, or there should be a little donate button on district-comedy.live. So with all that being said, we are going to transition now. Yeah, smooth as butter. Right?
Wouldn't have been able to just shoot it the next day with some equipment like running around the city. So yeah. So
yeah, it's kind of interesting how you say that, because it makes me think, in comedy we all like to have the person who knows how to like edit video and film and make you look good. Yes. And if there's a comedian that does that, they're kind of everyone's best friend, and it kind of makes it's interesting because you don't think about it working the other way. Whereas, you have all the technical skills, you know how to create a work, and you have the ideas. And then you can also just bring it to completion by having the acting background that you do. So that's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. I think, I think learning the things that you need to learn to move your own career forward is a really valuable lesson. And whether you're an artist in some other capacity or you're a comedian, the first couple of things I learned how to do myself was build my own website, build my own poster for a film that I shot, or a film that you know, even if someone else shot it or acted in it, if I was producing it, I was like, I need the marketing material, you know, creating your own marketing material and beginning to learn those programs so that you can really have like, you can show your personality without having to hire someone to show your own personality. That's really valuable.
Yeah. I mean, and it's definitely like going back to that thing about like actors tend to have to be the jack of all trades to basically get noticed because you don't know kind of what perspective somebody is going to be looking at you in order to give you that first foot in the door. But you mentioned, and I mentioned in the bio that I just read, about the decision to focus exclusively on women as the subject of your film work.
Yeah.
So what was it that led you to make that decision? And has that decision ever created any challenges for you? And if so, what were they?
So so it's a little bit of a marketing thing. Like, to be totally honest, I didn't realize that I had done this until like a year ago. I was like, oh, let me like look through my resume, let me look through my work. Oh my God, all I see is women. Like I did not purposely set out to do this. And I think that's a huge, you know, that's it says a lot about how captivating the dynamic portrayal of women's stories is that I was just like, these are the stories I'm interested in. And it was only after several pieces that I was like, oh my goodness, is there a theme emerging here? And then I was like, you know what, let me lean into this because that could be a part of my brand. But it was relatively accidental. And I've embraced kind of that happenstance of work, and it's led me to even more work that I've embraced and loved. So it was kind of a path that was sort of just, you know, like rain just comes down and like forges a stream, a path. Like that's how I feel. Like I feel like it wasn't a super conscious decision. I was just following stories that I was interested in, and this is where I am, someone who has that experience, that insight, and who wants to continue to make those stories. So yeah. But I think it does have challenges, but it does have rewards. You know, the film that I created, Space to Explore with Natalie Pennick, you know, I think that people are really interested and curious about seeing stories about women that aren't just A to B success stories. You know, like we have a lot of stories, inspiration stories where it's like, oh my goodness, here's someone's major hurdle and yay, they achieve their goals. And in the case of Natalie Pennick, that wasn't actually the outcome, right? So the outcome was that she is more incredible, more focused, is able to put herself on a trajectory that is more exciting, having had these big, wild, incredible dreams and working towards them than she would have if she didn't. But it's not that her biggest, wildest, craziest dreams come true. She's not an astronaut on Mars. And
Right.
she's not going to be because of reasons that detail in the story. But, you know, so I think for me as a storyteller, what fascinates me is looking at the landscape around in terms of women's stories and trying to find something more dynamic, something that people haven't seen yet. The reason I started the Quiet drama series was because I was, as a frustrated young female actress in Hollywood, I was looking around at these stories going like, oh my God, they all have so many feelings. You know, like, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but like you watch a TV show, a sitcom, a drama, it doesn't matter, like across the gamut, like, you know, someone breaks up with a female character and she's like perfectly in tears and completely communicative about like every feeling that she has.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a
super
like,
hyper emotionally intelligent. Yeah.
Yeah, super emotionally intelligent, totally accessible, very like freely emotive. And I was just thinking about myself going like, I don't feel like that's me.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
do I represent women who have a more stoic exterior, but a very deep interior life? And how do I show that interior life while remaining stoic and going against like this Hollywood push of like the emotional woman? So that's kind of what's been driving my curiosity. And I think whether you're underrepresented because you're a woman, you're underrepresented within your ethnicity or your gender or your whatever it is, I think if you can find a little bit of spark that's like, how dare you? Like, I hate seeing, like, I'm so tired of this. Like, I want better. I want more. That can really drive your storytelling. And I'm sure that's the same with comedy, right? Like you see, you have like big human questions at the core of comedy, don't you sometimes? Or like,
we do. But I think that also what's interesting about what you're saying is when you're talking about, how the roles that you want to play are not necessarily available. So you go and you make your own work, because that's a lot of what's happening on the comedy scene right now too. Because
amazing.
we've talked about it for a couple of episodes, but one of the things that I mentioned is that there's a big spike now in people doing these online Zoom open mics, and it's kind of created this this digital terrain has kind of created this environment where people can basically produce their own work and do a lot of what you're.
Underground is back.
What?
Like I feel like the underground, like underground art, like it's been gone for a while, actually speaking. Like people aren't paying attention to people's honest and gritty from the ground up offerings. And now because we have to, like, we don't have any other option but to create that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's given us a lot of leeway. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something you had to do just because of being in Hollywood and, them like wanting a certain streamlined, I guess, archetype.
Babe.
Babe.
Sure.
And now that's kind of happening again for much different reasons. Hashtag pandemic. But I feel like this kind of transitions pretty smoothly, so I'll just go ahead and ask it. But especially since earlier, I think you alluded to, you mentioned position of power, and that's something that we talk a lot about in stand-up comedy. And because the comedian is kind of in an inherent position of power, just because anytime you give somebody a certain amount of time, whether it's 3 minutes, whether it's 5 minutes to do a set, the full attention of a room, it kind of puts them out there in a very literal way. But having the attention of a crowd gives you power. And theaters, directors, film producers, such as yourself, really storytellers with an audience, are in a similar position. Have you found that idea is true, that it is a position of power? And if so, have you seen that power used in relationship to telling the stories of those whose perspectives are less often represented in the media? And I'll preface this by saying that, like, especially with stand-up comedy, I was somebody who, when I started doing it, didn't think of it as a position of power at all. I thought, people are going to listen to me, and it's like, you're in the frame of like a comedian, so who's going to take a comedian seriously? They're literally telling jokes. That's their job. But apparently I have been made aware of different opinions to this. So I'm interested what your thoughts are, how that may relate outside of the little comedy world.
Yeah. No, I think that's an amazing question. And I think that there's a lot to unpack there. And I'm not sure that there's like a perfect answer or one answer, or an answer that isn't necessarily going to change or evolve. So, one of the things that I've come across, I do think that directors are in a position of power. That's the point, right? There's a difference between a work that's being created out of a collective, or a situation where there's specifically no label of director. Uh, there's, if you guys are familiar with like the dance world, there's contact improv, right? Where you get like a group of actors together and they're all sort of like dancing and sort of like melding together and floating apart. That's very different than saying, okay, the choreographer is going to teach you these moves, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you're assigned the role of director, you're more the choreographer than you are the contact improver in a lot of ways. But that doesn't mean that you can't guide, but also be like just terribly open to other people's ideas, influences, and overall, of course, like putting on a show is a stage, is a place for a voice. So like, for example, when I was the associate director for the Phantom of the Opera, I was really concerned about having a woman as the Phantom. Not because, I mean, that's something I advocated for. Don't get me wrong. I advocated for that. But my worry was when we started getting like press release, like we started getting tidbits back from the larger media community being like sexy female phantom at Synecdoche Theater.
God, of course
like,
they did. Yeah.
Oh my God, like how do we, like that is actually not the point. Like the point is not that there's the Phantom and then there's this cute, sexy sidekick like version of the Phantom. The point is, and this is a philosophy that I believe very deeply in, and I'm trying to understand this philosophy and mature this philosophy while I like listen and am open to everything the society is telling us right now. But my philosophy is that every role lives within us. I could be Romeo. Romeo lives inside me. His journey through romance, through life, lives in me. To the same degree that Juliet lives inside of me. So, and that's true of you. That's true of you. Like we fictional roles are supposed to illuminate to us and ask questions to us of who we are. So that's very much a part of my philosophy. And if you're going to take that philosophy, then it's not about taking a position of power and lowering that position of power so that others can have power. It's about having a position of power and raising others to have power. Power is limitless. We do not need to take down other people unless they are not good people, unless we need to. But we don't, I think it's okay to have to inherently have structures where there is power and influence, as long as we are elevating everyone else's power around us. And that's very much a part of this idea that Irina Tsikirishvili has the Phantom inside of her, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a little bit of a different mindset than I think is trending right now. And of course, like you, Tom, like I'm open to continuing the conversation and understanding and maybe adjusting my own perspective. But that's something that's been very true to my heart and has guided me along in this process.
Yeah. And we can certainly talk more about that if you'd like, but I'm more speaking towards the I guess the power and I guess the responsibility that comes from that for like the specific story that you're going to tell. Like I think the Phantom is actually a great example, because the thing that you were trying to change, I guess, by making the Phantom a woman rather than a man, is to try and kind of change the power dynamic of the traditional story and give maybe an additional perspective on it. But I think that the points that you bring up are certainly a valid and additional layer of the conversation of like, whose story are we going to tell and who gets to tell those stories. So that's that.
Well, I think it's interesting too, because if you think, your whole philosophy of, as the director, you can use your power to empower other people. I think, I've never directed anything before, but if you think about somebody working with a very diverse cast, there's going to be experiences that your cast have that you don't.
Sure.
And kind of giving them a platform and listening to their input is a great way to inform your own view, it seems like, when you're creating a work. Because, if I'm trying to tell the story of, a queer woman from Brooklyn, I've never been a queer woman from Brooklyn, but maybe my lead actor is, and maybe she's got some like slang accents, like insights into what it's like, things like that. And it's a really interesting way of kind of flipping the idea of a director around, I think.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that a good director has to look for any bit of resource to come to a place of like understanding and cultivating story. And even if they don't understand, even if you're like, I completely missed like that cultural reference that you just said, can you explain it to me? Or can you show me? And then I'll understand how to help put it in, because it's obviously you're passionate about this. I mean, I think that listening to the performer and understanding where they're coming from is a humongous resource. And you'd be a total dumbass, frankly, to like miss those opportunities. Like you have to elevate the people around you to expose themselves. That's the art of storytelling, and to create richness and nuance. I mean, the point of being a performer is to, and I'm sure that you feel this way as a comedian as well on stage, is to simply be alive up there, right? You don't,
Right, yeah.
and that's hard. Like, I'm not saying it's easy, right? But that's the same with performance. You want people to be truly living, and they don't have to necessarily be living themselves. Maybe they're living a character, but that character is going to be enriched with a whole life of context if you all mine for that context and are open to that context. Sure.
Awesome. All right. So kind of, we've been talking about some pretty heavier things, which is awesome. I love it. No, that's great. I asked these questions too. But, kind of going back to, kind of art and the media and where we are in this new virtual environment.
Okay.
I mentioned before, the pandemic's been a hard blow to artists across the board, not just comedians, obviously, but theaters around the country, around the world. So if you would, do you mind telling us a little bit about what Cinetic has done to keep creating? Specifically, you just finished directing Joy, which was a one-woman show featuring actress Maria Simpkins. So if you don't mind, take us a little bit through that process, how you overcame the challenges, if any, that you encountered to translate a live theater experience to the digital virtual realm.
Yeah. Okay. So, oh gosh, what was the process? The process was Maria did a whole bunch of interviews with one of our staff members, Chris, who ended up adapting Chris Rushing, who ended up adapting and formulating a script from her personal stories. So we had this great launching point of stories to start with. And then we started working almost right away on the stage. And so for those of you who haven't seen the show, it was a virtual show that was done live each night. but presented virtually. But it wasn't as simplified as like, here we are in Zoom. It was like, it was on the stage. And so there was theatrical lighting. There was what we called the void, which was like an infinite blackness around her. And, you know, things would like appear and disappear, and she would pull things out, and the use of props. And we actually had a 3-camera setup. So she'd be like talking to camera A, and then all of a sudden she'd cut to camera B, and she'd like say a little something extra, and then it would cut back to camera A, and she'd be like dancing the flamenco or something like that. So there was a sense of movement and theatricality, even though we were in cameras. So, and at one point she like picked up the whole thing and like chatted with the camera as if, you know, we were a friend
Like
on
a selfie stick.
Right, exactly. Like on a selfie stick with her, like chatting with her on FaceTime. So that was so for those of you who don't know, that was like the basic flow. What were the challenges? I mean, it was a little bit tricky understanding. Well, I don't know. I think every single show is its own world, you know, and this show was its own world, and the world was like simplicity on the stage. And unlike your normal sort of super rudimentary situation where you're on the stage and you have a couple of black boxes and you have a couple of costumes, but you like see every part of the stage, and it sort of feels like a student production in a way, you know, because it was Zoom, we got to like create this blackness all around her that created a very magical world. So gosh, I mean, the challenges were like tech was like such a challenge. Like,
yeah, it sounds like more tech than you're used to.
Yeah, well,
or than a
you know,
theatrical production would have.
Yeah, more tech than a theatrical. Well, yeah, more tech for the size of the show, for sure. And just the constant sort of hassle of like having to readjust the cameras and the settings within the cameras and all of that stuff. And you know, and one of the things that I think was a real challenge was because Maria was co-directing this, in so many ways, she was a performer creator because these were her own stories. So, you know, something that felt right for her on stage didn't necessarily look right to me sitting in the audience, and maybe looked totally differently on camera. So that was one of the struggles, is that we weren't all looking at the same thing at the same time. You know, she's looking at a monitor that's in front of her, that's reflecting back what the camera sees of the stage. I'm looking at the stage, but I'm also looking at the monitor that's looking at her. Like, you know, that was
I'm already getting dizzy.
Just, yeah, exactly. So I don't know, maybe at some point we'll have like VR goggles and we'll all be in the same virtual world together, but that wasn't possible this time. That's, you know, goals for the
I'm so over it though. I miss a live audience so much. Even just like with some of the stand-up stuff, because I mean, especially with comedy, there's so much of reacting to them. And speaking of comedy, I'm going to just mention real quick that my Zoom has been lying to me, and we have not been streaming this whole time. So
but it says live.
I know it's lying to me because I brought up all the different pages and they're not showing the video. So I'm going to investigate what that is later. But what I'd like to do is, if you don't mind us finishing the interview, and then I started recording, and I'm just going to do a stream later that plays the recording. Unfortunately, I feel like we may miss some of the people who are set up for this time, but I just wanted to let you know about everything that was going on, as is the struggle that is technology, which I'm so glad you didn't have an experience like this while trying to do Joy.
Oh no, we did. Like,
great. So you get
it. I mean, yeah, I think opening night, right? And like, I was so nervous because previews, because my old boss, who is the president of NBC, was in the audience.
Oh my God.
And she's watching the show, and Maria accidentally, during that face FaceTime moment where she's got the camera, she accidentally pulls the camera out and disconnects the feed from the entire show. And then she has to like run around and like plug it back in. And then she comes back and I was just like, oh my God. Like just dying in the lobby going like, what do we do?
Well, that's actually also a great parallel, because sometimes what I'll ask comedians is like, what was the worst gig you ever bobbed? And I guess like the theater equivalent is like, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you on stage where you've just had to pretend like nothing's happening?
I know do you want to know what the worst thing I ever did was? The worst
yeah.
Oh, definitely.
It was my first show in Hollywood. I was fresh out of Cinetic, so I was like looking to, use my skills. I found a physical theater company. It was so bad. It was so bad. It was a BYOB.
Oh God.
Small black box theater, and we reenacted scenes from Pink Floyd's album The Wall. And it was the worst. It was so embarrassing. I had one friend who was absolutely dead set on coming to the show because he's a really huge Pink Floyd fan. And he just sat there drinking beers, like looking, and I can see there were 10 people in the audience, 10, right? And he's just super confused drinking his beer. It was so embarrassing. Oh, never done anything that bad before in my life.
Yeah, but I feel like, well, I mean, especially at Cinetic, we try and do like very ambitious things. So we have some dress rehearsals too that can be like a little hit or miss, but somehow for opening it tends to come together. But yeah,
together in the end.
But I'm glad you shared that experience. That makes me feel slightly less bad. Sorry for everybody in the future watching this to hear me talking about this, because it won't be applicable later. And then this will be, I guess, I think this is the last question I have as far as like talking about live performance in the digital medium. But when working on Joy, what did you find was like the differentiating factor for how the digital live theater production was going to be different than other forms that have adopted the digital medium? Like, how is it different from film, the YouTube videos? I mean, I've noticed a trend of the, I guess, social media platforms and like that digital content getting like shorter and quicker and more succinct. But for, live theater to make its own mark, how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, in order for it to be theater, there's got to be a component of it that's live, I think. Or else it's theatrical cinema, which is wonderful. Don't shy away from it. But Joy was live, and we had pre-recorded elements, like we had her own voice coming in with poetry and with soundscapes. And, we had things like that were pre-created. That supported her performance, but she was the person giving her live, nuanced energy each night a little bit differently, interacting a little bit differently with the story and with where she was in the world. And I think that's what really feeds the audience for theater, is that live component. So yeah, I think it's gotta do it live.
Gotta do it live for sure. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't get to, but my fiance Chris got to see Joy, and it seemed like there was also an additional element, and I thought that this was really interesting. But I guess you had to go to the box office and you picked up like a little kit of things to interact with during the show. Feelings about this box.
We had like the producer, we had like staff members like putting boxes together and like sending them. Like we were box crazy for a long time, trying to get these boxes out to people. Yeah, but so like, yeah, interactive. I mean, live and potentially, if you want to, interactive. We had a box where at a certain moment she would, Maria might start talking about the moon, and a moon would appear in her virtual void behind her and sparkle and dazzle. And she would keep talking about, the influences of her mother and things like that. And meanwhile, there's this little icon, boop, boop, number 3, beep, beep. And you like open your box and you find object that's labeled number 3 and you unwrap it, right? And then you're holding this little moon for her, and then she's like, oh, I have to talk to the moon. And so then she's talking to this thing that you have in your hand. And in that way, theater is magic creating, right? Theater gives you a sense of magic.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I said that was going to be my last question about it, but this will be it, and then we'll move on. But just because that's such a cool idea. But since you're kind of going to be leading, I guess, Cinetic's expansion into, I guess, having a films branch or a recorded content branch, how are you envisioning that, as far as it being like something completely standalone or having that interactive element like you did with Joy?
Right. Well, so just to be clear, Pata is still like the visionary of Cinematic Motion Pictures and all things. I am like the logistics operator and like helm, because I'm coming from a film background where I've recently been making films. So I think that for Cinematic Motion Pictures, we're not going to be doing live work. We are considering doing more digital, virtual, interactive live shows, but that's not under the Cinematic Motion Pictures umbrella. Cinematic Motion Pictures is films, and they're going to be theatrical, Macbeth or All the Worlds of Stage. We just wrapped last week Scott Brown's All the Worlds of Stage film, and now we're in post-production where he's editing and coloring. But we have a few filmmakers in our world that have the capacity to take on these more film intensive projects, and we're going to lean into that. And especially in this time, because people can be working from home, we can be creating, you can create cool stuff from home. And we learned that lesson very strongly with the Decameron, which we did in the spring. People really showed up, and there were some truly remarkable pieces. I think if you can find, it takes a little bit of bandwidth and like heart to figure out what you can do that you can pull off. That's like cool, but if you can spend a little time figuring that out, then you can come up with some really cool stuff, even if you're at home. You really can.
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of really cool pieces in Decameron. And then there was my little Draw My Life on a Whiteboard, and that's what I contributed.
It was such a great, but it was so full of personality, and that's what we needed, people to be able to express themselves. And your piece was like actually helpful, because like the Decameron is a massive text from the 1300s, and like people actually needed your guidance very much. Like you needed to be like shepherded along by your illustration. So that was, don't
for
discount
reference
that. That was
for everybody in the future watching. My piece was basically summarizing a bunch of the stories in like less than a minute each, with stick figure drawings. And that being said, Roz, would you like to mosey on to number 7 in our list of questions?
Sure. So you've been featured co-hosting the YouTube show Real Rejects.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? It seems like a really kind of fun type of project to work on.
It was. So, and it was one of the things that like happened in my life as sort of without me having to do all of the freaking work to like earn it. You know what I mean? Like, which is very rare for me. I'm usually like start to finish, like grinding and like beating something and like screaming into the pillow. And then like there's an outcome. But for this, it was relatively easy. I think we just got connected from a friend, and he invited me to co-host his real reaction, his like live reaction videos of trailers as they drop, movie trailers. So, you know, and sort of hype up the movies and stuff like that. And I ended up doing like over 40 of these. And when I finally moved to New York, he like dedicated a couple of episodes to like mourning my departure and like creating these like very hilarious like mashup videos. And this guy has, you know, hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I think he hit 1 million recently. He's, you know, really created a brand and a name for himself. And he's like a crass goofball is basically the deal. And I was kind of known as the like more poised, but like still playful one of his sidekicks. There were many other male and female co-hosts. He's done hundreds and hundreds of videos, but it was wonderful for me because I was able to be sort of loose and goofy and reactive, and gain a little bit of an online following. So, and he believed, you know, he believed in me as, you know, a performer and as a personality. And it's, you know, you might have friends believe in you, but total strangers, it's a different thing. And so I really like have a soft spot in my heart for Ryan Wright on The Real Rejects, for sure.
Oh, that's so great. And that's also not the only like sort of comedic impression you've made on YouTube. Katherine has her own YouTube channel, and there are some sketches on there that I thought were like pretty funny, and one specifically that I thought was damn ahead of its time was the one where you're doing the breakup of the Skype, where you both are like, you're in a long distance relationship and you're both on Skype and you're trying to have sexy times. And then of course it has the classic, what we now know is like the Zoom breakup of like, and I was just like, man, how is this? I think it said it was like recorded 3 years ago, and I'm just like, how is
no,
Katie
way longer.
Oh, longer.
Way longer.
Okay.
So that was actually the first piece of the first film I wrote, directed, and starred in. And that was probably like 2012. Maybe
Wow.
maybe 2013. That's how old it is.
Oh, wow.
So long ago.
Where was I back then?
Long hair, and then I went to short hair, and now I've grown it back out. That's how. But yeah, that was a really fun little piece to do.
So there you go, everyone who's like exclusively comedy content. There it is for you. You have it all. All right. So you've worked in New York, Los Angeles.
Yep.
Now you're in DC.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about the cities and their different vibes as regards to working in the entertainment industries? They're like really that like cutthroat competitiveness in New York, and I mean it's also known to be competitive in LA, but I also imagine that it's like, I don't know, there's beaches and like everyone's gotta be a little bit more relaxed, or no?
So as a competitive person, I hated LA so much. And I lived there for 6 years. And like, I decided I loved California because I loved going to the beach. I loved going to the mountains. I loved going to the desert. Like there's so much incredible California to discover, wine country, the Bay, all this stuff. But LA, I couldn't vibe with it. And I think I'm honestly just like too much of an East Coaster. I think I was like, I want to do. And everyone else is like, hey, let's do some Molly and go watch sunset. And like, sure, sometimes, but not every day. So LA and I did not.
I know exactly the East Coast feeling you're talking about, though. That's like,
yeah, I'm an East Coaster for sure. So I moved to New York, and I like got off the plane, and I was like, I'm home. I'm on the East Coast. And like New York was just, and I lived like, I worked right in Midtown Manhattan. I was 100% in the full life of Manhattan, and I loved it. I loved it. But you know, I was born and raised in DC. I actually ended up getting a nice chunk of funding from a hedge fund manager who I met through my job in Midtown Manhattan. And I said, okay, how am I best going to utilize these resources? Well, I'm going to go back to DC where my rent is half of the expense and I have a lot more freedom and I have a good community for art, but also for filmmaking and documentary. And so I left New York and I love the city so much that I go back like every few months to get my hair cut.
Oh my
Is that
God.
why
I won't let anyone else cut my hair, but this woman named Ruthie in the theater district. So I have to go back all the time.
Oh my God. I also just like love the idea of like getting off the plane and like a businessman like pushes you aside and they're just like walking really fast on their way to work and you being like, oh, this is what I've been missing. I'm home now.
Oh my God. I mean, I had so much more chemistry with that city. Like, do not try to create a career for yourself in a city that you don't have chemistry in. You're actually not going to succeed, even if you desperately want to. And I desperately wanted to be successful in Los Angeles, but I didn't have chemistry with that city. In New York, I was there for a year. I had a couple conversations, where I like nuanced and like, not nuanced, where I like cultivated this investor. And I literally walked away from a lunch one day and like looked up. I was like at the corner of Central Park and like Park Avenue and like 54th. And I like was that young woman who went, I got the money. I got the money. And not a single New Yorker like beaded an eyelash. Like no one looked at me, like this is they're like, yep, at daily in New York, like this will happen to you. And I was just like yelling at the rooftops, like, I got the money. And, and you have to have chemistry with your world. You have to, or you won't succeed. You might learn a lot.
That's cool.
I learned a lot in Hollywood, but I didn't start succeeding until I left.
Oh yeah. And I'm sure that like you probably learned a lot of great lessons about like probably dealing with different personality types than you would necessarily encounter very often on the East Coast. But Roz, do you want to send us off with the last question?
Sure. So you've done a huge variety of different projects, from comedy to directing to working as a performer to doing biographical pieces. So what is coming up next for you? Like, what's the next big thing on the roster that we should look out for?
Yeah, so other than, I think the most immediate thing is going to be Cinetic Motion Pictures and producing those works. But I've also been working for the past year on a feature film documentary about it's a documentary profile about this woman named Carolyn Wester, who's a coach. She's a wrestling coach, and she is one of the best wrestling coaches in the world. And her champions are UFC world champions. So you've got this little blonde, middle-aged woman, blue eyes, sweet as pie, Southern charm, and she is teaching wrestling technique to the biggest international all-star MMA fighters in the world. So that's what I've been working on in my time away from my, like, let's say Cinetic is like my day job. And that's why I'm like, here, I have like I have so many, like, how many hard drives can I take in my hand right now? Wait, I have another.
Oh my God, that's so many.
There's another. Anyway, it's just ridiculous how much.
This is what happens when your day job is in entertainment and then your hobby and night job is also in entertainment.
Yeah. But I'm very happy to be able to say that, like, I am a producer director.
Yeah.
Also performer. But like, that is what I do. I don't have another job at this point. So I'm not making tons of money. That's the next goal, but like, I'm sustaining myself off of these projects, and that's been a long time. I put in my, my legwork
Put your
on
time
that
in.
one. So
Yeah.
for sure.
And also, like, especially, in these areas where it feels like the only way anybody is successful in entertainment is you have to go to these big cities where the rent is still the highest and people still do not, at least to me, pay the appropriate amount to artists or to
Yeah.
directors and producers until you get to the very high end of that scale. It seems like it's this very like wide spectrum of like success that you can
Well, I
provide.
really admire you guys for taking your own impetus and creating what you've created here, because the best thing that you can do is create your own opportunities. And you would be amazed, you know, one of the big philosophies in Hollywood is like you plant a seed and it goes underground, and 10 years later that seed turns into something, and it might be 10 years, and it's so impossible to think of your life that way. But now that I am 10 years ahead from that point, I'm seeing the seeds become flowers, and it's like, thank goodness, like I worked so hard to plant those seeds. So plant your seeds.
Plant your seeds, everybody.
Seeds, everybody.
Be your life gardener. Okay.
Yes.
Drink lots of water.
Be your life gardener.
I'm gonna, even though we're not live streaming right now, do our outro, which is thank you all for watching episode 5 of Laughing Into the Void, and to Roz for co-hosting with me as always. Thank you, Katie, for being such a great guest and for pushing through all the technical issues with us.
Thank you.
And again, did you want me to plug your Instagram?
Sure.
Or do you want me to plug anything? Yeah.
You
so
know, I would plug my YouTube, because I've decided to re-engage in that. That's something I haven't done used in a few years, but now that I'm continuing to produce, I thought I would reintroduce myself on that platform as a producer director and see if I retain my fans. I don't know if I will.
Well, I just subscribed while I was researching, but if you don't mind, because I forget, is it under Katherine Dubois or Katie Dubois? Or
yeah, I think it's just like YouTube / or whatever that is, Katherine Dubois.
Awesome. So you can find her there, and then if you want to follow her on Instagram, Katie_on_parade. And then if you want to watch our previous broadcasts or this broadcast,
or this one,
this one will be live streaming later, aka now if you're watching this. But otherwise, you can find our past stuff on YouTube and Facebook for District Comedy, and our Twitch channel. Or at least I think it holds on to it for like 2 weeks before it gets rid of it. So if you want to catch up, you can do so there. And if you want, you can listen on Spotify. That normally comes a couple days after this records. And of course, don't forget to donate if you enjoyed the stream, and every tip we get from now until the end of the campaign goes to Cinetic Theater in their 2020 end of year campaign. And on that note, please remember that we're still doing a regular broadcast, hopefully, of Laughing Into the Void on Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And this week we will be interviewing New York City-based comic Ralph Anthony, and I'm really excited about this one because he is so funny. So tune in for that. We'll probably be there, but it's never a guarantee. That's part of what makes this show exciting. So
I hope we'll be there. I have other plans that night. So
yeah, well, and if we can't stream again, then we won't be there. Oh my god. God. Oh, that just kills me. I can stop recording at least. But all right. Well, that was the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed, and of course, please remember to go to either the website bit.ly/Cinetic2020, and that'll take you to the page to donate directly, or if you go to district-comedy.live, again, all the donations given there are going to Cinetic as well. So pick your poison, but that's it for now.